My name is Evan Shaw. I'm 37 years old, and until a few years ago, I worked as a senior operations analyst at a logistics firm in Kansas City. It wasn't a glamorous job, but I was good at it. Spreadsheets, routing models, system audits, the kind of quiet back-end work that keeps fleets running and warehouses humming. I had a decent salary, a corner cubicle, and just enough recognition to stay complacent. But I also had this nagging feeling, like we were missing something. Our routing software was outdated, delivery windows kept slipping, and every quarterly meeting ended the same way. Someone asking why costs were up and customer satisfaction was down, and someone else saying, "We're doing everything we can." We weren't. I kept a notebook on my desk, not for meeting notes, but for what I saw the systems doing wrong. Every failed delivery, every driver complaint, every workaround we used to hide the cracks instead of fixing them. I didn't tell anyone. I just watched. And when I finally quit, I took that notebook with me. I told my family I was going out on my own, which in retrospect was a mistake. They heard that and assumed the worst. My dad called it a quarter-life crisis, which didn't even make sense given my age. My mom was more subtle. She asked if I needed money. My brother Mark, always the loud one at the table, said, "So you're just, what, freelancing? For who, Instacart?" I said I was testing an idea. He laughed and said, "Right, let me know when you IPO." It wasn't worth explaining, not yet. What they didn't know, what no one knew, was that I'd been quietly developing a new routing logic model on nights and weekends. I needed real-world input, not sanitized API data. So I did the only thing that made sense. I became the input. I registered on 4 grocery delivery platforms under my own name, bought a thermal bag, drove an old Corolla with 183,000 miles on it, started picking up orders at 6 a.m. sharp. From the outside, it looked like I had crashed hard, but I was learning in ways no analyst in a tower ever could. I was mapping real routes, watching app logic fail in dense traffic, logging when support teams sent canned replies instead of solving anything. Every shift taught me something. Every screw-up was a data point. No one in my family saw that, though. To them, I'd gone from corporate respectability to that guy with the delivery bag. At Thanksgiving, my cousin made a joke about how I was closer to the mashed potatoes than anyone else, because I was the one bringing groceries now. Everyone laughed. I laughed too. It was easier that way. That night I went home and opened my laptop. The routing model had reached 82% accuracy in predicting optimal clusters. I was close. I just needed more noise in the system to test under stress. So I signed up for double shifts that weekend and kept driving. Christmas came a few weeks later, my first real break in months. I had planned to skip it, honestly, say I was busy or sick, but guilt got the better of me. So I showed up to my parents' house in a faded hoodie, jeans that smelled faintly of car upholstery, and a stiff smile. Everything about that house was the same. The worn carpet, the plastic tub of cookies my mom always put out, the fireplace that hadn't worked since 2012. Everything except the way people looked at me now. When I worked at the logistics firm, I was Evan with the job in tech. The one who always showed up in slacks, answered emails during dinner, and occasionally talked about system dashboards no one understood. That version of me had some respect attached to it, polite, distant admiration. Now I was Evan the delivery guy. I could feel it in the way they paused too long after asking, "So how's work?" in how quickly they shifted topics if I said I was still figuring things out. Halfway through dinner, Mark sat next to me at the kitchen island with a beer in hand. "You know," he said, "I get needing a break. Hell, I've hated my job for years, but leaving a steady paycheck to, what, drive for tips?" I didn't respond. "You had a career," he said again, this time a little slower, like repeating it would make it true. "You worked your way up. People knew your name." "I still have a plan," I said. Mark gave me that pitying smirk, the kind that says, "I'm trying not to insult you, but you've clearly lost the plot. Well, I hope it works out. I mean it. But come on, man. This isn't sustainable." He patted my shoulder, got up and rejoined the others. I stood there a minute longer staring at the counter. My phone buzzed, a push notification from one of the apps. High demand surge in my zone. Tempting, but not tonight. I walked upstairs, sat in the guest room, and opened my laptop. The dashboard loaded instantly. My route prediction model had hit 87.3% efficiency in real-time tests, way ahead of where I thought I'd be by now. Even better, two of the independent drivers I'd quietly invited to test it had sent feedback. Both had improved delivery volume without driving longer hours. One had even gotten a 5-star review with the note, "Fastest delivery I've ever had." No marketing, no budget, just an idea and data. I closed the lid and leaned back. It didn't matter that my family didn't understand. They weren't supposed to. This wasn't a shortcut. It was a rebuild. Brick by brick, shift by shift, mile by mile. I slept maybe 4 hours that night. At 5:30 a.m., I was back behind the wheel. The city was quiet, cold, still asleep, and I was already working. By January, I'd memorized every inefficient turn in the city. There's a left-off 47th that costs drivers 3 minutes during rush hour because the traffic signal favors the cross street too long. There's a roundabout near Glenwood that the routing algorithms treat as a highway exit and keep rerouting people out of their way. Most delivery apps ignore these things. They rely on general-purpose mapping APIs that were never built for short-haul logistics. I started keeping a second notebook. This one wasn't about ideas. It was about failures. Not mine, the system's. Missed deliveries, misplaced packages, customer instructions that the apps garbled or ignored, promotions that overloaded warehouse staff. I logged everything while pretending to be just another guy trying to earn gas money. But in truth, I was building something under it all. The prototype I had started back when I was still employed, just basic route logic and clustering, was now becoming a full dashboard. I was teaching it to identify patterns, which zones were regularly late, which stores constantly caused backups, which driver habits caused delays no matter how optimized the path was. Most importantly, I was building it for the drivers, not the companies. Because if the drivers succeeded, the system succeeded. And none of the big platforms seemed to understand that. I worked 50 to 60 hours a week on the road. Nights and weekends were for code. Sleep happened somewhere in between. There were no investors, no co-founders, no funding rounds. Just me, an aging laptop, and a whiteboard crammed with bad sketches of logistics flows. Every time I hit a dead end, I reminded myself why I started. I remembered the executive meetings at my old firm where every good idea was postponed because it didn't improve Q2 numbers. I remembered the day our CTO said, "The apps aren't perfect, but they're good enough for now." They weren't. I had seen the drivers struggle. I had been one. One night around 2:30 a.m., I got a message from a guy named Joe. He was one of the early testers I'd invited, ex-Uber, ex-Postmates, now working for 3 services at once. "Man," he wrote, "whatever this tool is, it's saving me a lot of headaches, even if it's just showing me which orders to skip." That hit me. I hadn't even designed that functionality intentionally. But the interface I built gave him clarity. It helped him think smarter, faster. That was the point. I started sending beta links to more people. Quietly, selectively. People I met at grocery store parking lots. People I saw at 7 a.m. scanning their phones with tired eyes and crumpled order slips. People who, like me, had seen how broken the system really was. A few deleted the link without clicking. A few responded, "Is this legit?" But a handful, just 5 at first, started using it daily, and they started sending feedback. "This zone always gets delayed on Sundays. The app sends me into apartment complexes that take forever. Can you add a warning for 2-story walk-ups?" I added every feature manually. No dev team, no Jira board, no roadmap. Just emails, notebook scribbles, and 18-hour workdays. By March, I had 7 drivers using the app regularly. 2 said their weekly earnings had gone up by 10% without working longer hours. That was the moment I realized I didn't have just a tool. I had the beginning of a system. It wasn't about optimizing deliveries. It was about rebuilding trust between technology and the people actually doing the work. And somewhere deep down, I knew, if I could get this right, the companies would come. But first, I had to make sure it worked for the drivers, the ones who had been laughed at, like me. By late spring, the tool had a name, not a flashy one. No startup buzzwords, just load map, short for localized delivery mapping. Simple, descriptive, and easy to remember. I bought the domain, threw together a basic landing page. It didn't say much, just a line about helping independent drivers plan smarter routes and a link to request early access. I didn't run ads, I didn't pitch to blogs. I wasn't looking for users. I was looking for believers. The kind who didn't need a pitch deck to understand a good tool. The kind who had been on the ground, stuck in apartment lobbies, cursing a bad GPS pin while a customer sent angry texts. Within a week, 17 drivers signed up. Not a lot, but every one of them came from a personal referral. The system wasn't beautiful, the interface was clunky, but it worked. It let drivers preview delivery zones by real-time congestion patterns, not just traffic, but operational friction, construction zones, gate codes, building layouts, even whether store staff were slow at pickup. The data came from users themselves. It updated constantly. One guy, Chris, ex-FedEx, now fully independent, called me out of the blue. "I don't know what kind of backend you built," he said, "but I'm finishing routes 20 minutes earlier every day. Whatever this is, don't stop." That call meant more to me than any promotion I'd ever received. But then came the real test. The moment I knew this couldn't just be a side project anymore. A contact from my old logistics firm, James, senior analyst, smart guy, reached out. We hadn't spoken since I left. He asked if I had time for a coffee. I agreed, assuming he just wanted to catch up or maybe vent about corporate nonsense. Instead, he pulled out his laptop halfway through our meeting. "You said you were working on some delivery tech?" he asked. "One of our mid-tier retail clients is bleeding money on last mile. Their internal tools are garbage. They'd kill for a 5% improvement." I told him I wasn't pitching. He said, "Just show me what you've got." So I did. I opened the dashboard and ran a demo using their region as the data layer. I simulated 200 concurrent deliveries and displayed where LoadMap would have rerouted, skipped, or bundled them more efficiently. Even in simulation, the savings were obvious. Fewer miles, tighter clusters, less driver downtime. James leaned back and just said, "You built this alone?" "Mostly," I said. Jesus. That night he called again. He'd shown the tool, quietly, to his regional director. They wanted a pilot. No contracts yet, just exploratory. But still, it was real. I had nothing formal in place, no legal entity, no privacy policy. So I spent the weekend filing an LLC, buying real hosting, tightening security. When the documents were ready, I signed the first ever client agreement for LoadMap. It wasn't a huge deal, no life-changing money, but it was a milestone. I emailed the 5 most active users and told them the truth. The app was no longer just a side experiment. I was going to try to turn it into something real. Every one of them replied the same day. "We're in." Some even offered to help with testing. One, Alicia, said she could help with Spanish translation for the onboarding. Another sent me a spreadsheet of all the broken intersections in South KC that caused consistent delays. They weren't employees. They were stakeholders. And for the first time, I started to think this wasn't just about solving a problem. It was about building something that actually respected the people on the ground. Meanwhile, my family still thought I was doing gig work. At Easter, my dad asked if I'd thought about going back into logistics. I told him I never really left. He nodded, not understanding, then changed the subject. That night, while they watched TV in the living room, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop finishing the deployment for my first business client. At 11:47 p.m., the dashboard went live. A real company was using my system. I looked around the house. The old curtains, the family photos, the quiet hum of a fridge I grew up with. And I realized no one here would ever ask what I built. Not because they didn't care, but because they assumed they already knew who I was. I wasn't prepared for the speed. The moment LoadMap went live for the pilot client, the questions started pouring in. Not from drivers, but from mid-level ops managers trying to understand how a no-name tool built by a former analyst could outperform their licensed enterprise software. They weren't hostile, just confused. How is this mapping delay-prone intersections more accurately than our traffic partner's API? Why are driver feedback reports showing 40% fewer complaints in the load map zones? Are you scraping data from our systems? I wasn't. I was just listening better than the platforms they paid millions to. While big vendors obsessed over predictive analytics and AI route scoring, I focused on what actually pissed drivers off. Stairs, locked gates, parking tickets, irregular store prep times. None of that shows up on a satellite map. LoadMap's whole advantage was built on something they'd all missed. The system listened to the workers. The client didn't make a public statement, but word spread internally. Within a month, I was asked to do a private call with 2 other regional leads. By then, I'd hired a part-time engineer, a quiet guy named Ruben I found on a local DevE forum. He didn't care about pitch decks. He cared about clean code, fast response times, and not over-engineering what already worked. We clicked immediately. Ruben helped me tighten the back end. We added encrypted session tracking, anonymized route logs, and a small portal for company side managers to monitor delivery metrics without accessing driver identities. It wasn't glamorous, but it worked, and it allowed me to stop driving. That was hard to admit at first. I told myself I'd stay in the field until I got things right, but eventually I had to scale. Data was flowing. Feedback loops were in place. It was time to build. My mornings now started with server logs and ended with strategy calls. And somewhere in that blur of progress, I got a call from someone I hadn't spoken to in almost 2 years. Jason Burke, Director of Field Tech at West Edge Retail Logistics, one of the largest third-party grocery delivery contractors in the Midwest. He used to be my counterpart when I was still at the firm. We'd worked on one project together years back. I respected him. He was pragmatic, sharp, not the kind to chase trends for their own sake. "I've been hearing about something you're running," he said. I kept it vague. "Something in routing, not sure how it got to you." He chuckled. "You're smarter than that. I've seen your system, Evan." That made me pause. "How?" "2 of our drivers use it. They've been quietly loading your maps on a second phone and adjusting their shift patterns based on it. Our internal metrics flagged an inconsistency. Their efficiency went up, but they weren't using our approved route planner." He didn't sound mad, just curious. "I'm not poaching," I said. "I know," he replied, "but we want to talk." The next week, I drove out to their ops office. Not a skyscraper, just a low-slung concrete building near a regional airport. Inside, I met Jason and 2 other senior staffers. No suits, no legal team, just clipboards, laptops, and tired eyes. They didn't want to acquire. They wanted to license. Not company-wide, not yet. Just a trial in one region, 6 weeks, full access, independent evaluation. I agreed, on the condition that driver feedback be prioritized in any success criteria. They nodded. That was unusual. In corporate logistics, user feedback is code for optional survey no one reads. But Jason didn't flinch, so we launched. And within 3 weeks, delivery completion times improved by 11%. Driver turnover dropped. Even customer complaints, which we didn't even directly touch, declined by 6%. Because when the system respected drivers, they had more to give. That's when I started getting emails from people I didn't know. "Hey, a guy at West Edge said you built something. Can I try it? I heard about your tool from a guy named Chris in KC. Any way I can get access? Don't care if it's pretty. Just want to stop getting screwed by broken apps." And quietly, behind the scenes, LoadMap began to grow. I updated the interface. Ruben added support for a second language pack. We built an opt-in community feature where drivers could flag trouble spots on the fly. And every change came not from strategy meetings, but from lived frustration. Still, I didn't tell my family. At my mom's birthday dinner, I got a call from Jason with the Westage trial results. I stepped outside, standing in the cold near their trash bins, listening to stats that validated everything I'd worked for. When I came back in, Mark looked up and said, "Everything okay? Your car still running?" I smiled. "Yeah, just some guy asking for directions." And I meant it. I just didn't say which direction. It hit the account on a Thursday morning. $183,000. Licensing fee, plus 6 months of support and integration assistance. My first serious revenue. I stared at the screen longer than I care to admit. Not because I didn't expect it, the contract had been signed, the payment scheduled, but because for the first time in nearly 2 years, there was visible, undeniable proof that what I built mattered. Not just to drivers, not just in theory, but to people with budgets, decision-making power, and expectations. I called Ruben. "It landed," I said. He paused. "You okay?" "Yeah, it's real now." I wired him his share that afternoon, more than he'd asked for. He earned it. Then I sat at my kitchen table and wrote out a list of what we needed: cloud scaling, security audit, part-time UI designer, and legal review. Then I wrote a second list: fix the busted sink, replace my car's bald tires, call Mom back. I did the first 2 that week. The third, I hesitated. Because here's the thing. Success is harder to explain when people already think you've failed. By that point, my family had settled into the idea that I was figuring things out. No more interventions, no more jokes, just quiet tolerance. My mom stopped asking questions. My dad assumed I was consulting, a catch-all word that means we don't really know what you do. And Mark had other things to brag about. His new company car, his kids' soccer tournament. He had no use for my ambiguity, and I didn't want to correct them. Not yet, because something in me wanted this to stay quiet. Wanted to build without noise. Wanted to see how far it could go before anyone tried to put it in a box. So I reinvested almost every dollar. We moved LoadMap off a shared cloud instance and onto a hardened architecture. Ruben and I hired a freelance UI/UX lead, Emily, a woman from Austin who specialized in clean interfaces for non-technical users. We gave her 2 weeks, she stayed 4. By the end, the dashboard looked like something you could charge real money for. And we did. Quietly, we launched a tiered structure, free for individual drivers, paid enterprise tiers with analytics, admin tools, and route clustering for high-volume clients. I didn't want to turn it into some bloated SaaS nightmare, but I wanted it to sustain itself and to grow. The adoption numbers surprised even me. By July, we had 64 active drivers using the tool weekly, 3 enterprise clients in pilot or paid contracts, and 1 very careful email from an Amazon logistics analyst asking for a capabilities overview. That last one I didn't answer. Not yet. I'd seen what happened when small tools got too much attention too fast. I wasn't going to scale until the system was ready. But it made me pause, because it meant people were watching. Not just drivers, not just the underpaid, but the top. The ones who'd ignored this space for years because they assumed it was too fragmented to fix. We started getting unusual requests. Could LoadMap integrate with dispatch systems? Could it analyze warehouse load times? Could it optimize multi-stop routes for mixed cargo? The answer was yes, eventually. I wrote a roadmap, for real this time. Not a wish list, not a dream. A timeline. 12 months. If we hit half of it, LoadMap wouldn't just be a tool. It would be a platform. That week my mother called again. I answered this time. "Are you still doing deliveries?" she asked gently. I smiled. Not really, just helping the people who are. She paused, trying to make sense of that. "Well, if you ever need anything, you know we're here." "I know," I said. "Thanks." She didn't ask more, and I didn't explain. Because the next morning, I had a strategy call with a grocery chain that wanted a white-labeled version of LoadMap. And all I could think was, this thing might actually work. And they still think I'm chasing odd jobs. I wasn't offended. I was focused. It came in quietly. Just a short message from a corporate address I didn't recognize. I stared at it for a full minute. No legal threat, no recruiter pitch, no buzzwords. Just a calm, deliberate ping, like a finger tapping a chess piece. They weren't just curious. They were watching. I forwarded it to Ruben and waited. He replied in under 5 minutes. "Don't ignore this. But don't rush it either. He was right. We weren't ready for attention at that level. Not yet. But that email changed everything. Not because I thought Amazon would immediately buy us. Because it proved we had become visible to a player that large, without a single dollar in marketing. That same week, Westage extended their license by another 6 months. A second region was added. And quietly, they referred us to 2 smaller fleet operators struggling with hybrid grocery parcel routing. We onboarded both in less than a week. Meanwhile, driver adoption passed 100 active weekly users. Our backend was straining. We upgraded again. Emily redesigned the onboarding flow to cut training time in half. Ruben rebuilt the data caching logic to stop timeouts. We hired a part-time QA guy just to simulate routing in cities we hadn't personally driven in. Loadmap wasn't a tool anymore. It was a product, and it was scaling fast. But growth brings risk. One of our early driver users emailed me in a panic. He'd received a message from a regional manager at a national delivery contractor warning him to stop using unauthorized software on the job. They didn't mention Loadmap by name, but it was clear someone, somewhere, had started digging. I rewrote our privacy policy, added encryption to our logging, pulled a few identifiers from the free version to protect driver anonymity, and still, more users joined. But back to the Amazon email. After a week, I responded, "Thanks for the note. Open to a call. Please let me know your availability and intended scope of discussion." I expected silence. Instead, I got a calendar invite the next morning. 3 attendees, 30 minutes. Product compatibility inquiry. I looped in Ruben. We agreed, don't pitch, don't ask, just listen. The call was professional, measured. They didn't waste time. They asked about architecture, expansion roadmap, average efficiency gains per driver, regional flexibility, data ownership, and anonymization protocols. They asked what my long-term vision was. I told them the truth. I built this to give power back to the driver, not to replace dispatchers, not to squeeze another 1% out of margins, but because I was one of them, and none of the platforms were listening. There was a pause. Then one of them said, "Understood." That was it. No follow-up questions. No hint of what they were thinking. They ended the call with, "We'll be in touch." 2 weeks passed. We kept working, kept onboarding. I tried to forget about it. Then on a Wednesday, an email arrived. Subject, proposal, Loadmap acquisition. It came from someone with a Corp Dev title and an oamazon.com address. The number in the attached PDF made me sit down. $41.2 million. Cash acquisition, quiet close. No press release. Option to stay on as platform advisor for up to 36 months. Equity in a new internal division pending launch. My first reaction wasn't excitement. It was silence. I sent the file to Ruben. He didn't reply for 2 hours. Then one line. "This is what happens when you build the right thing and don't rush to be noticed." We scheduled a meeting. No lawyers yet, no signatures. Just 2 tired builders looking at a number that would change everything. But I had one problem. My family still thought I was barely getting by. At dinner that Sunday, Mark joked that I must have found a rich girlfriend because I wasn't asking Mom for money anymore. I laughed it off. Then my dad, unprompted, said, "Whatever you're doing, I hope you're happy. But if you ever want to come back to the real world, we'd all understand." I just nodded. Because they weren't wrong. I had left their world, and I wasn't going back. I signed the acquisition agreement from the same kitchen table where, a year prior, I'd sorted delivery slips and hand-drawn route maps by flashlight. No champagne, no announcement, no one cheering behind me. Just a quiet notification from the bank, confirming the funds had cleared. $41.2 million. Wired, clean, final. Ruben came by that evening with 2 coffees and a box of grocery store donuts. We didn't toast. We didn't say much. We just reviewed the transition plan, signed our final deployment notes, and sat in silence while the platform's back end was officially handed over to Amazon's internal team. At 11:03 p.m., the Loadmap admin console logged me out for the last time. I didn't log back in. The next morning, I went for a walk. No calls, no dashboard, no tasks, just silence. That afternoon, I called a trust attorney. "I want to pay off my parents' house anonymously," I said. "No contact, no explanation, just make it clean." He paused for a moment. There are ways, quiet ones. He handled the logistics, a trust transfer, property settlement, a single envelope mailed to their address with a confirmation letter and a contact number in case they had questions. No signature, no message, just freedom wrapped in paperwork. A week passed. Then my phone rang. It was Mark. "Did you do something?" he asked, no greeting. I played dumb. "Like what?" He lowered his voice. "Mom got a letter from a law firm. Said the mortgage is cleared, entire balance, paid off." "That's great news," I said. "She thinks it's fraud. Dad won't sleep. He's convinced someone's trying to blackmail us, or worse, that it's connected to that scam call he got last month." I kept my voice level. "Why would someone pay off their house?" I heard him pacing. "I don't know, man. That's what's freaking them out. No name, no message, just done." I almost said something. Almost. But I didn't, because the truth wouldn't make sense to them. They still thought I'd lost my way. Still thought I'd left the real world to chase some idea that would fall apart like all the others. They didn't see the hours, the code, the frustration, the vision that no one funded but me. They didn't know I'd met with one of the biggest companies on earth and walked away not feeling proud, but vindicated. And I didn't need them to. I ended the call by saying, "Maybe it's a blessing." Mark sighed. "Yeah, I guess. Still weird, though. Mom's been looking over her shoulder." I almost laughed. Not out of cruelty, but because after all those years of them worrying about me, now they were worried because of me, without even knowing it. That night, I sat in my apartment and opened a notebook I hadn't touched in months. The first one. The one filled with the early ideas. Messy diagrams, driver complaints, notes like, "This won't scale, but it feels right." I flipped through the pages, and at the very back, in red ink, I'd written something 2 years earlier, long before any of this worked. If this helps even 10 drivers live better, it was worth it. We passed 1,000 users 3 weeks before the acquisition. I closed the notebook, locked it in a drawer, and the next morning, I flew out to meet with 3 of my earliest driver testers. They didn't know why I invited them. They thought it was about feedback, but I had other plans. Each one of them was about to get their first round of seed funding from me. No pitch decks, no strings, just one condition. Build something that makes the system listen. The rest will follow. And they nodded. They knew exactly what I meant.